or got through that intro without fast forwarding. If you've watched it, you fools. If you watched that whole 30 minutes on like Tuesday or something, you should have got through to that quicker. But thank you anyway, and welcome to this evening. It is After Hours with the boys from the Baltic Star. Let me put those graphics up. There we are, a bit of neon. Where we just chat about things, really. Chat about things from the Traveller universe, the Baltic Star universe. What are we talking about tonight, Ben?
Well, again, it will probably become freeform and increasingly drunken, but the original idea was that we were going to discuss the world of Ossin that you guys have just left. Not that you might not go back there, but you've left it for the time being, at least.
Ossin, we knew her well. No, we knew her half well, apparently, from what you said.
Well, actually, I was reviewing my notes, and I reckon you did at least 80% of what I had down for Ossin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. So I think you actually covered pretty much the majority. There are only a couple of sort of major bits you didn't go to.
Major bits, you say? Oh no.
Bits for next time, I think is what Ben means.
Yeah.
Things we've saved for a later date.
Saved for another time. Yes. Yeah. Because you never know, you might go back to Ossin at some point.
Oh, I need to do some trading with them. So I think we need to go back. Yeah. Shipping lane stuff.
Yeah, well, to be fair, you haven't completed your first trade yet, so...
No, that is true. That's true. We do need to find the trading base on Geeka. We can't just let Ewan run off willy-nilly to Earth Park, all excited. There's some work to do.
Got to see the grandparents.
We're not going to a theme park. We've got some serious trading to do.
I can see Agnes. I'm like, please, be a bit jumping up and down, like tugging on her arm.
Are we there yet?
Can we? But you promised. Mm-hmm. Look, we've just got to do some serious things first. A bit of trading, bit of refueling. But look, all right, calm down.
I bet it's the type of thing you can, we're on the top of 7 mountains, or what were the tops of 7 mountains. I bet it's the kind of theme park that you can see from everywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
Just taunting you whilst we go off to do some trading.
That's what
you
Carl
hear
will tell
screams of excitement around.
That's what Carl will tell Agner. She'll get Sarah to hand him her binoculars and say, look, while I do some trading, you can still see it. So why don't you just look at the first part of Earth Park from here? That means we don't have to go to it when we're there. You can have just as much fun.
Look at everyone else having fun. Still stuck here.
Oh. We weren't going to be able to afford all of it anyway. It's very expensive. we were going to stay in the second cheapest of the hotels. The one that's still 40 minutes walk from the park.
I get the feeling there's some actual experience coming through here in this conversation.
It's starting to get too real. It's starting to cut a bit too deep right now.
Yeah. Well, yes. So with Geeka yet to be discovered, I think it's fair to say Geeka is not yet properly explored. You've only done one little random secret insertion mission and made a telephone call. Broadly speaking, that is so far your experience of Geeka. So perhaps we ought to talk about Ossin. Or to be fair, we could talk about anything that the group has done up to this point. It just seemed logical that we'd have a talk about Ossin because you've literally just come off it. Also, am I not right in thinking it's basically the most involved you've got in any of the world so far?
It's not the first time we've killed a planetary leader.
No. But the first time we did it, I think it was very much more of a fleeting visit. We kind of, showed up, decided who we liked and who we didn't like, and kidnapped one of them and left, and then kicked them off the ship.
Yeah.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah,
There weren't many other interactions.
No. There was the occasional placid, gentle gardener who needed murdering, but other than that, yeah, it was it was a much more involved one this time. You did a number of different kinds of missions, whereas in essence, though you did divide into 3 groups, as I remember, on Kigarisa, those missions sort of all happened in parallel. So it was all really one thing, just broken up into bits and pieces.
And it was all with one aim as well, wasn't it? It was all with the aim to eliminate the people that we deemed to be having a bad influence on the planet, to not have the people's will at heart.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah. Yes,
that was the goal.
Yeah, you more or less decided that whatever the people on the planet had actually chosen as their lifestyle, you knew better than that, so you were going to enforce one for them by picking who you thought should run things.
Yeah,
exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Whereas I think on Ossin, it felt as though at different times there were different objectives that we possibly had as a team. I almost did team then. We are a team. We're a good team.
Oh, I've got to make notes about Stefan. That was definitely Stefan doing team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel as though we had several different objectives along the line.
Yes.
During our stay.
When you first arrived, you quite quickly got the basic geography. You realised where the Italia was, Daedalus Station, the orbiting ships around the planet. And I can't remember if at that point you had any understanding of the layout of the city of Fredericksburg, but since you more or less went directly there, you'd have worked that out pretty quickly as well. And then quite rapidly you found yourself hurled into the underbelly of things through various acts of violence and basic crime.
Hours.
Yeah.
It's just like living in Faversham, really. I think that's why we took to it so well.
Yeah, it did feel that way. I mean, pretty much, I think it's true. The very first person you spoke to on the planet, you slammed up against a wall before you'd spoken to him. And then you sort of came back a little while later to have a chat with somebody else in roughly the same place, and immediately mugged him and got into a fairly brutal fight with his bodyguard.
But that said, it was good that we met that first person, because that is someone who has come along with us. It was the first person we met on the planet, but
as it turns out, it's related to one of our crew members.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean his skill set is a little bit unformed, shall we say? But nonetheless, he could prove a valuable ally. I mean, his sister has. Sammy has turned out to be very useful, hasn't she?
Definitely.
If he could be half the woman that Sammy is, then we'll be all right.
If the four of our players could be half the woman that Sammy is, we'll be all right.
Right. So then you send for Sammy, basically. So she's going to come back down, and you head back out to do some shooting and some shopping. Not actually in that order. I think you did the first part of the shopping and then the shooting and then more shopping, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. We're kind of shop first kind of people.
Yeah.
We had nothing to shoot with.
Well, yeah, I think we wanted to buy some new stuff to shoot with, and then realised that it was getting shipped back to the ship.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So you purchased some new stuff, a few augments for Stefan, which have already proved quite useful.
Yeah, they've been used. I'm not sure. I can't remember off the top of my head what he paid for them, but I as a person, will be keeping a running total of what he paid for them and how much I feel I've got back for that money.
Yes.
To better inform my purchases in the future.
Yeah. I mean, he's had a few a few opportunities to use them, but despite my joking about the sheer scales of violence that you used, you actually weren't all that violent on Ossin at all, except on that one occasion, really, other than when someone came after you. You know, the relatively unprovoked attack on poor Reggie.
Poor Reggie.
Yeah.
I say not relatively unprovoked. It was completely uncalled for. However, it did lead to a quite interesting thread pop out, because you ended up interfering with a fairly substantial financial transaction, which dragged you into the Riftsman's Guild, into their orbit, and of course Sever, who became an ally and is still a travelling companion, at least as far as we've got. Though you did just throw him into a railway tunnel, so you know.
He's a big boy, and when he moved across, it was only a small shuttle, and when he moved across from one side to the other, it totally threw me. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't expecting the sudden weight. I'm used to the small guys, you know. Stefan's not beefy, Kara's little, Agnar's careful with his feet. He's sort of an old military man. So I wasn't used to the big strapping beef guy lumbering across to jump out. I'm blaming on him, and I'll go to my grave with that viewpoint. And you know, all's well that ends well. He got out okay. He gave the thumbs up, kind of.
Yeah. He did sort of thunder towards the doorway, I imagine. You know, if for no other reason than it's simply in his nature to thunder pretty much everywhere, isn't it? He's a thundering sword. But yes, and you began to uncover this sort of backstory of what was going on. And though there are obviously other people who could have been instrumental in the in your uncovering pieces of it, Sever was a convenient hook in because he knew bits of the story. And then he gave you a job. He pitched you a mission while you were still dealing with the aftermath of your mugging, robbery, and what have you. He pitched you a mission to go to a mine and deal with a sabotage problem.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think we'd just potentially saved the life of his friend, Reggie. I think we'd proven ourselves worthy enough. We'd backed down from each other, haven't we? We'd proven. I like to think that strength seems to be his language in some way. Like when we've had discussions later on, and he sort of asked everyone how they handle themselves. Anytime we've sort of said, you know, not the greatest shooter, or I talk first, he's sort of looked a little bit disparagingly. So I feel that by standing up and standing our ground and looking after his boy and doing our thing, I think we fully deserved the mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
He seems a salt of the earth kind of, or he certainly did at that point. He seemed just, you know, salt of the earth kind of guy.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, you didn't know everything there was to know about him. In fact, you still don't know everything there is to know about him, but you know a great deal more than you did then. So you set off to this mine, which is obviously a very deep mine and works through magnetic induction and pulling metal ores right out of the core of the planet. Did you actually think it would be a sabotage job?
I did, I think. I have to admit, I assumed, given what had gone on, mostly the attempt on Reggie's life, I guess. Whilst that was quite possibly tied to the money that he was meant to be delivering to somebody, it could look equally as been tied to a feud between the guild and somebody else, and the fact that he was the what I would assume to be the weakest link at that point, laying up in the hospital bed, unable to defend himself.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be those guys. Like you say, I thought it'd be Black Sun or whoever we were thinking at the time was behind it.
Yeah.
With their dastardly ways of appearing and firing off rounds when you least expected it.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I thought it wasn't because of what we found there.
But even then, we were suspicious, weren't we? Throughout, like we made sure because we could take 3 down, but 3 didn't. Only the ones with hostile vac suits could go down, couldn't they? Because of how hot and nasty it was down there. But the 3 that stayed up sort of did some computer checks. They did some checking on things. We checked on the 2 engineers that went down to make sure they weren't suspicious and things. So we can tend to play it quite suspiciously sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Both us being suspicious and being suspicious of other people. But yeah, we were definitely double and triple checking who people were. But there was nothing that, at that point, when they came down and they were fine, I think I was definitely starting to think of, perhaps it is something natural, perhaps it is because these there were the creatures there. And so it was and that was the next bit, I guess, when we actually ran into some. Like your setting was fantastically done with the darkness, knowing very well that it's all lit, but to make it work, you're going to have to go through that stage where the lights will go off. And then I'm realizing, one of my characters can't see in the dark properly anyway. I think Agnar's got terrible night vision. And I was like, oh no.
There was also, I had one of those roles because quite unexpectedly, once you'd sort of worked out that there was probably an alien involved, you immediately divided your party into 4 individuals.
That's the most stupid thing we could
positions where they couldn't support each other.
Party.
Which I must confess, I hadn't assumed you would do. I thought you would either defend the bridge to the main drilling apparatus and clump together there, which was going to be fun because the way I designed the creatures was that they could run just as easily underneath the bridge as on top of it.
Oh no.
So that would have been quite fun to play out. Or you would scarper into the actual cave system, which would provide some protection from the magnetic field, and you'd get your sensors back and your night vision back. But obviously, you'd be further away from the lift and the way out. Instead, you cheerfully split into 4 different locations on the map.
Have you still got the map for that space at all? Is it something you can get to relatively quickly, or is it going to take too long?
I can bring it up, I'm sure, yeah.
It'd be nice to enable memoir. Why I did that? Because the way it's set up, for those listening, was it was down a massive pipe, down a massive hole, basically, that went for, was it like 20 kilometres or something? With a station?
Yeah,
with a station
basically.
Like a level every 100 metres. And we went down to quite a long way, past halfway. And so it was hot, it's dense. Only the lights, the thing going down, it was all electromagnetic. And the problem was that something was nibbling, or something was doing something, or something was like smashing up a pump at that level, which kept the pipe stopping, which meant they couldn't pump up the important materials they needed. And so you had the pipe where we got out, there was just enough space for a lift. Next to the pipe, a little circular platform around the pipe, one walkway across to a narrow ledge around the circularly hewn out pipe, whatever one of those things is called, and then some caves. And we so when everything went on, we split into 4. You're right, we split into 4. We had one stood on the lift, because the idea was once the button got pulled for the lift to go up, the lift went up, and everyone else sort of got stuck there with no radio and So we thought, exactly. Let's put one on the lift, one on the walkway to protect that, one on the ledge, and sort of thought that was going to be a good idea. Until the light started flickering, Ben. and that's and that's when we scarpered quite wisely because you had. Did Sammy come? Sammy came down as a geological
Yes.
scientist,
Yeah.
and she
That's
went.
right.
She went into the cave, didn't she, to sort of defensively, and then
Yeah.
her lights worked again a bit more, I guess. So
Yes, you'd actually put Sammy down here on the sort of bottom right of the map on the ledge, quite close to the sort of gap on the right that leads up back to the central lift shaft, and so accordingly, I because she was on her own, she couldn't see the people on the ledge or back on the main metallic complex. I decided I had to make a roll for her to decide what she would do, because obviously she couldn't see anything and she couldn't hear anything reliably. The radios were intermittent. She was basically in the pitch dark thinking there were creatures coming for her. So I basically made a roll. I decided that on a 1 or a 2, she would retreat back to the lift. And on a 3 or a 4, she would go into the mine. And on a 5 or a 6, she would stay put, as ordered.
Mhm. Yeah.
And she rolled a 4, so she went into the mouth of the mine to get her sensors back.
And I'm glad she did, really, because that dragged the team with Agnar. You went straight with it, didn't you? But pretty much.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I mean, I guess it could have turned out a plethora of different ways just based on that role, let alone what we did with that role or what came from that role.
Yes, I mean, if she'd retreated, I mean, if she'd stayed where she was, it would have been quite interesting, because it would have been not necessarily obvious to each character when their friends were coming under attack. You were getting intermittent things like lights and radios.
Yeah, it's very like Alien in that sort of thing. Some flickering lights, a little bit of static every now and again.
Well, it would have been very much like Alien. As it was more like Aliens. You grouped together and fought them off as a team. Yes. The interesting thing is, these were not that. I was sort of trying something with them because they were not particularly powerful or dangerous enemies. They weren't particularly fast moving. They didn't have particularly a plan or a strategy or anything like that. They were basically dumb animals. It was only the situation that made them genuinely dangerous.
Yeah.
The environment was a big part. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we were one-shotting when the lights were on and we were near to them, and they started swarming around Soraya and that, we were one-shot killing them. It was just that sort of, you sort of hear the scampering, you don't quite know where they're coming from. There's suddenly a mass of them, and especially if it's dark and flickering. I'd imagine if we'd have stayed on the platform, that it could have been quite terrifying in that regard, because we couldn't hear anything either, could we? Because we had to have the suits on.
No.
So you literally were deaf with a little bit of radio, and like gun flashes, I guess, would have been all you could have seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
You would have seen light from any explosively powered weapons, but you wouldn't even have seen that from a laser, for example. And things and electronic devices like torches and what have you were intermittent. Suit lights were intermittent. So yes, it would have been quite interesting to see how you coped with whether or not you'd almost literally joined hands on the walkway in order to be able to feel when somebody else reacts or jerks their hand away or whatever. That would have been quite interesting to see what you did. But as it turns out, you fought through the caves instead. And I'm not disappointed that you did that. You understand? I'm perfectly happy with that. I'm pleased you retrieved the bodies of one of them. Based on your past gathering expeditions, I'm quite surprised you didn't try to capture one, actually.
That is true.
because it's the kind of thing you have tried before.
We've got Moab eggs, which have probably gone off by now. We've got now on the ship.
Did you buy some incubators?
Yes, yeah. We've got some incubators that can have some. That size would have fitted in, definitely. I think they'd take a lizard or a crab or a spider kind of size thing. We took a snake, didn't we, from Tufa? We killed one and took one. Yeah, we took
the zombie mass.
The zombie. No, we didn't, did we? I hope not. I really hope not.
I don't think we did, but we carried it around on the planet for a while. There was definitely,
a sprouting leg.
When, it was being transported around with the party for some time.
Yes.
Off world.
Yeah, no, you didn't bring that. Bring that off world.
I think what Ben is suggesting, Ewan, is that when we do go to Earth Park, we try and steal some of the smaller mammals and get them back onto the ship as part of our travelling menagerie. Maybe like a badger or something.
We're basically the equivalent of what in this country used to be animal preservation. Was it animal preservation? Where, they'd go around and shoot some animals and bring the stuffed bodies back for display in a museum.
That's such a Victorian kind of approach.
Yeah, exactly.
And in your case, possibly for pickling.
Yeah.
I do now quite like the idea of bringing some small animals off Earth Park to have roaming around the ship in our very strange travelling 1920s thing. Yeah, like little strange creatures sitting on people's laps while they drink with little leads. I quite like it.
Are there many travelling circuses in space?
Only ours.
I think of you guys more as a cowboy outfit, to be honest.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's an earned thing.
Yes. Yeah. So finally, having dealt with that, you got back, you collected your money, and at this point, you were sufficiently generous to actually throw some of your earnings back to Sever to pay for Reggie's medical bills, if you remember.
Well, I think we felt partly responsible.
Partly. I remember partly responsible.
I'm just curious what in your definition would be wholly responsible. I'm just.
I don't know. I like to leave wholly for when we really, really need it. It's like, if you turn up to 10, unless you're, if you turn up to full volume, where can you go if you need a little bit more? And not to 11.
It's wholly responsible.
Yeah. We need to leave a little bit for wholly responsible.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Yes. So you completed that, and you almost immediately discovered that clearly Black Sun wasn't done with you yet, because you'd barely got underway when you found yourself under attack by them again. Though, to be fair, you weren't actually the target of their first attack. You just happened to be there at the time. But the second one led to a fairly nasty but short firefight. A few bodies to clean up, which Sever and the guild took care of for you. And almost immediately you decided that Black Sun clearly was not going away. So you had to do something about it. And you lent on Sever to get you some information. He got you a location. So for the first time, you disappeared up into the orbital part of Ossin.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, to go and launch an attack on the on this currently unused section of the refinery system in orbit around the planet.
And that was the first of our Twitch episodes.
Yes, that's right. That was the very first one. In fact, I think,
hadn't we?
Yeah, the very, very first one we streamed, you were already lined up at the top of the map, basically, to go in. Yeah.
Oh, it started so well.
And so that introduced you to another new character who you hadn't met before, Falco.
The Grand Fromage.
Who yeah, the Grand Fromage, who Sever obviously knew, but you didn't, and who seemed, his very existence seemed to incense Sever for some reason. He didn't really have to do anything to get Sever angry, so clearly there was some reason for that. And he, like the coward he is, immediately ran away and jumped into a spaceship. Which, frankly, I think is cheating. If you point guns at people, they should damn well stand still while you kill them.
Yeah, especially he left his little underlings to die, and he scarpered.
He did, yes. I must confess, I do think that is quite despicable. I know I'm speaking to the people who literally watched Greyhill Bass die in front of them, but that was very much an accident. You didn't deliberately say, no, you take the bullets, we'll do the partying. That was not a deliberate thing, was it? So
it's a style though.
Give him the choice.
Sammy Cress is Stefan's official bodyguard, basically. Protective wall.
She certainly is.
It's a fair point. You didn't have Sammy on that trip, did you?
No.
No, because she had been wounded.
But it's a very Bond villain thing to do. Leave your minions to die and either scamper to retreat or scamper away to the next room to hold up. And wait for your assailants to come to you.
Which means,
well, you never know. If you ever see him again, maybe he'll try monologuing.
I was saying, I think that's our first meeting. So our next meeting is going to be in the back room of a casino somewhere on Geeka before we get our big finale with him. I'd imagine
in a casual situation where we can have a little back and forth, but nothing really.
You can't get violent.
Any combat because we're in public. And then you get presented with the grand showdown.
Yeah.
Yes.
With complications, obviously, because we're involved. So there's bound to be complications.
Yeah, things won't go entirely according to plan. I think it's fair to say. Yeah. Well, I mean, you may yet have more to do with Black Sun because they're on Geeka as well.
Yeah, they're in charge. They're in charge of the security for Earthbark and that. I look back through the notes. That was part of that picture that Kara had to scan and get the details for, and it was a data pad saying about security for Earthbark, and it was a Black Sun logo and that. So,
yes,
I hope they let Agnar on. He'll be very disappointed otherwise.
Stood outside peering in.
They've got a list of faces. These people not welcome.
Yeah.
For previous.
You must be this human to ride.
I would assume, as a person, that their security outfit for Earthpark is very different to their nefarious doings on other planets. Couple of bouncers at a theme park dealing with tourists and families and
they got a badge with their name, and underneath it will say like, I speak human Varga Zodani.
Yeah, I love the fact that you are in fact a human and you think there's a language called human.
Well, there is now, I guess, national. What are we speaking? We're not speaking Esperanto, are we? That didn't make it big in the end, did it? That didn't win out.
Well, yeah. What's the
swerve?
Human-based language?
The weird thing is in the Traveller rules, it is not particularly strictly defined. So that there is an assumption that people are using a lingua franca, which is probably derived from some hodgepodge of English and other languages. But because of the history of the Imperium, it's actually just as likely that it's Villani or something like that is the basis of the language, which has become hodgepodged. Because, only the second of the three sort of human imperiums came out of Earth, and even that one was only partially out of Earth, and the other two grew up in different parts of the galaxy, because part of the backstory of Traveller is that these ancients went around and grabbed various species, both intelligent and not intelligent, tweaked them, modified them, did whatever they wanted with them, and seeded them around the galaxy. And this happened certainly from millions of years ago to thousands and thousands of years ago. So you've got now entire civilizations that came out of that. And the first human empire didn't actually arise on Earth, though Earth is believed to be the origin point of all humanity. The first one to really build an interplanetary empire were Villani. They came from a nearby sector, not very far from Earth, but a bit further away. And the first Imperium was the Villani Imperium. Ooh. So though it's entirely possible that people are speaking, English, there's no reason to necessarily believe that. And there are obviously language skills in the book. You can make more or less of it as you choose. So far, you've, for the most part, been traveling even when you're off the beaten track, it's still kind of people who were from the beaten track, if you know what I mean. Yeah. It's still people who went to major universities or traveled with the Imperial forces or that kind of thing. They would all communicate fairly straightforwardly in a single language. You haven't spent a lot of time, in fact, any time, traveling into the Varga extents or into Zodani space, or even into worlds that haven't been widely contacted and would have their own completely independent culture. The closest, I suppose, you've come to that is probably Kigarisa, but even there, it was in constant communication with the Imperial Navy and Scout Service. So this is not exactly it's embargoed, but it's not out of connection. I mean, it might be more so now since you've completely upended the planet, obviously.
Yeah, and sort of nearly ruined the life of the guy who was kind of in touch with them the whole time, that Paul Street guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nearly. I like to think that we're speaking Flemish. That's the language that I think would have lasted best if that's become part of if that's the part that Earth has given to the language is Flemish.
So Belgian Dutch, basically.
Belgian Dutch, yeah. Mixed in with some of the stuff from the first Imperium, and just a nice hodgepodge.
Okay, well, fair enough.
I mean, I suppose as a rule set, if it's not very specific, it lends itself quite well to whatever you are speaking in the country that you're playing it in, or with the group that you are playing it with. You can...
Yeah.
Or you can use your imagination if you want and come up with something completely different and just assume that it is translated upon you saying it.
Yes, I mean, I
it's
think
quite an open-ended rule, I guess, or setting.
We're playing with dubbing.
Simple truth. Yeah, I mean, the truth is, it's up to how you want to envisage the galaxy that you're playing through.
Yeah.
For me, it doesn't make a lot of sense that you would have regular interstellar commerce with people you couldn't routinely communicate with. They would all have access to the same television shows and radio shows and movies and things like that. So even if there were a local language, and there might well be, it doesn't mean they wouldn't also have a pretty strong command of whatever the generic trade language, lingua franca, is. In an ideal world, what I wish I was capable of doing is encapsulating individual accents for each planet or planetary region, actually inventing completely new accents for them. But I haven't got the slightest, tiniest sliver of the skill set that would be required to do that.
It might make me feel uneasy if you did start doing it, to be honest. Was it always like in D&D, like when people do dwarves, they're always like Scottish, and then, like everything always falls into the same
Every
kind of
dwarf.
thing. Every dwarf is Scottish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same. So everyone from Ossin is like the Black Country, and
But on the
bad.
flip side to that, I think that leaves it quite open to you saying something from an NPC on Ossin and me interpreting it completely different to the way that Luke interprets it, which probably coincides somewhat with the atmosphere on the planet that I interpret compared to how Luke interprets it, which I can imagine is very different to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Some things are going to be very much the same, but I don't think I ever envisioned us walking down the street in broad daylight. I always pictured it as this, dark, not necessarily dreary, but quite neon kind of cyberpunk-esque kind of image. Even when we'd just woken up, I imagine just walking down dark streets.
Yeah, I'd like strip lights that
And
are
that's-
far above that. Maybe at night they go down to like 20%, but even in the middle of the day, they only get up to about 40% light, kind of thing. A little bit of flickering, a little bit, like you said, some signs, like I said, a bit of cyberpunky signs near some of the bars and that, a bit of neon, a bit of flickering. I envisaged when we went to see Johnny in his place, and you talked about going into that space with like the racks of houses on either side.
Yeah,
that was very visible to me, I think, and I think that tied into what Ewan was saying, that view of that kind of thing, really.
Yeah, but I think the accent can, I imagine Ben speaking, or the NPC that Ben is portraying speaking, probably in a very different way to you do.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah,
which is great for me and great for Luke, and I think it draws us into the world a bit more.
That's why I like theatre of the mind.
Being specific about things. Yeah.
It's like reading a book. Everyone sees. You and I can read the same. All three of us can read the same novel, but we'll picture the buildings or the streets or the people differently. And there's something beautiful about that, because it makes it all your own adventure, even though it's a shared experience, which is great.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, you could go into insane amounts of detail describing everything, but there comes a point where you're not actually adding value anymore. No. If you've got a sense of the kind of place you're in, you can sort of fill in most of the detail yourselves. But it is, there comes a point where you're doing too much describing and not enough actual doing and interacting, and that's less fun, I think. But it's it's good, and after heading up into orbit, which was the only time you actually went up to the orbiting ring at all.
Yes.
You did pop into orbit one more time to visit Pramus on the Italia.
Yes.
But we'd not met her yet at that point until we came down from orbit.
It wasn't until you returned back down that you met Pramus, and at this point, you were sort of introduced to a slightly wider set of underlying conspiracies that were going on, and one after another, you had a series of sort of quite interactive encounters with Pramus, with Seva, eventually with Strife of the Guild and the Governor and his assistant, and slowly you sort of pieced together the fact that there was some powers moving in their own ways around each other, sort of maneuvering for advantage, and you very much picked who you wanted to see win that battle. And I must confess, I did leave it open for you to pick, but I was surprised by who you picked.
I think, and this was...
Perhaps we should have done more research if that's the case.
Yeah, because you did say that there was something about Krebs. Kara didn't roll particularly well. She sort of looked at some stuff, and you said there was something about her past or something. Because he'd been on Dilab Brew, and I was trying to work out some dates and things, so I couldn't work it out that evening. But that night, I think it came from that night where the way he was playing along all nice, and then he sort of hit us with some stuff quite late in the session, and then Sever came in, and we were feeling a bit betrayed. And that's when me and you in that week were like, right, so that we know we're on the same page, let's list all the players, let's get everything straight. We had to sort of get some names straight, didn't we? We were sending messages around, like making sure we know who Black Sun were, who Night, who Neocaster, who all that Dark Knight, and then who everyone was. And then we basically sat on Messenger for an hour or so, just sort of listing and sort of getting it straight in our heads, I guess, which is one of the things that these sort of sessions allow us to do, is go away and just try and work out. Because discussion we would have around a table over a 7-hour session or whatever, you can't really do over 2 hours. So we wanted to be a bit focused, I guess. So
more direct in the play.
Which actually I think is stronger. I think fewer digressions makes the play more flowing as well.
And it's easy once you get into that discussion of, oh, well, who's this? Or, you start talking about what you want, and then you start talking about clarifying for each other who the players in the affair are, and then it's quite easy to digress off of that to something that's completely irrelevant.
Yes. Yeah. And that moment you're talking about where you suddenly felt betrayed by Sever is my favourite moment in quite a long time.
I'm glad, Ben.
That was a fun moment for me.
Just after Agnar, I bought him like 2 kegs of beer to take on our journey.
I've gone up to the bar and bought him 2 kegs of his favourite, whatever it is, homebrew that they drink in the bar.
Yeah.
For his trip to Geeka with us.
It was a good lesson though, because we do tend to take to NPCs we're almost too trusting, I think, at times. And I think it was a good lesson that he still might be trustworthy, but I think, because I said, I think he's just there's certain things that he takes, most importantly, like the stability of Ossin, for example, above everything. And I think it was hard for us to lose that. Like, it's like in Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe, and they say, like, is Aslan safe? Like, safe? No, he's a lion, but he's good. And it's like, is Sever on our side? No, but he's, you can get to know what he's all about. And I think that was a good life lesson, I think.
Oddly enough, though, I think we're too trusting of people that portray, what we want to be portrayed. I think Papa Krez, for example, he was very frank with us and he was very honest with us, I think. And we decided that he wasn't that kind of people. I certainly decided that he was hiding more than he was telling us, but I get the feeling that he was pretty frank and he told us what he wanted. And we distrusted him. Rightly or wrongly.
Well, the way I try to write these things, there shouldn't be a right and a wrong answer generally, and there isn't. Every character that you met, I'm pretty sure had both motivations that could certainly be construed as decent and those that could be construed as selfish. They had things they would be willing to do which were perhaps unethical, and things that they would not do, that they would choose to shy away from.
As are real people.
Yeah, so you try to sort of create each one with a basic idea of this is their core motivation, and then that drives their behavior. And I think you actually nailed Sever's quite well. I'm not convinced you quite got to the bottom of either Strife's or Krebs. But to be fair, you didn't spend as much time with them. So
I think what got me was, for Krebs, for making the right or wrong decision, was he's sort of almost like paid off by corporations, which I know the Rissmen are doing for the sake of the pipeline. but it totally played into my. It's where you let your own personal politics come into a character, and you and I were both fall. You and I both fall in the same direction in many ways in it, and so our discussions are like, power to the people, power to the working man kind of thing. Is the Riftsman Guild the right way for that? Because they are quite imperialist in some ways. There's a lot of money in the Riftsman Guild, for example.
The word guild went a long way, I think.
Exactly. A guild.
Some conglomerate of working men who are all trying to fix their prices in a tin hut every year.
Yeah. But it's worth pointing out the Nazis had the word socialist in there.
Well, that is true.
Yeah, and perhaps that's a lesson for us to take forward, is to not assume things are what they say they are, even if we're talking about conglomerates and names.
Reality isn't necessarily the way it's presented. If you didn't know any better and you were walking through a newsagent, you might accidentally think the Daily Mail is a newspaper. It sort of looks like one. It's got the the layout of it. You think, yeah, that looks like a newspaper. Things aren't always the way they seem, as you say, and it is of course possible that sometimes they aren't exactly what they seem. But I think most people have a motive. It's not necessarily an ulterior motive, but it's one that they're not necessarily upfront about, because most people try to hide how selfish they are, or how avaricious they are, or how obsessive they are about something. Everybody has something that they're not necessarily ashamed of, but they wouldn't put it forward in a job interview as being their greatest character.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What's your biggest weakness? Oh, I just work too hard. The classic job interview. Yeah. I think the thing that tipped it when we were talking about it was that Papa Krebs had been the one who sabotaged the pipe, and that was something that the planet relied on. To me, it felt very. I know his vision was to get Neocaster back in charge and sort of get rid of the Riftsman's Guild, which, like I said, they've all got motivations. But to me, it felt negatively affecting the people that he was supposed to be the governor of, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. And bear in mind, this is a guy who, whether his motivations were pure or very dirty, was basically sent there from outside by the Imperium as just like an imperial governor sent down to rule the planet. Yeah. It's not as if he was there by popular vote or by general acclaim.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's easy to see him as either just a puppet of imperial policy, or an officious little fascist on his own, or some power broker who's working on the basis that if he can line up enough corporate contracts, then he'll retire a very rich man, or whatever else. But I mean, there are such people, I'm sure, who've also been extremely devoted public servants. And it's entirely possible he was one of those as well.
Yeah, and he sleazed on Kara, so
Yeah.
That might have been the defining moment.
That was the moment. Yeah, she said, "I'll do a painting for you." He's like, "Well, if we have a private meal." I said, "Well, come on."
Yeah. This man.
That's it now. He's got to be gone. Steph.
Live on planet-wide television.
Agnar's knuckles whiten.
To be fair, he is probably the first actual professional politician you've met in the entire campaign.
And that was our automatic response to
the immediate thing is, it's a politician, we must kill it.
It rings true to type, at least. There we go.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I don't feel particularly bad about Krebs dying. Were you surprised after the murder? Were you surprised at how they found a suspect?
You had a moment, Ewan.
I thought they were going to pin it on Syl.
Ah,
When Pramus said we have a female in custody, or we've already caught the person, she is in custody, or I was like, hold on, who's close to this guy that is a she that we know on this planet?
yeah.
And I assume, I mean, it probably would have been an easy thing to pin it on his assistant who has close access to him and everything that he's been doing. I assumed that was going to be their play.
Yeah.
I was quite surprised when it happened, but there was definitely a moment there when I thought they were going to try and say it was Syl.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously, having promised you that you would essentially get away with it, provided you didn't have any obvious witnesses, there had to be a way of making sure you weren't under suspicion.
Yes.
And, you know, you were the off-worlders at the party, so they had to act fairly quickly. But the actual... I made the decision that that announcement would be made almost immediately, just a few hours before we played the session, because I wanted the announcement to be one where Pramus could say that there was no need for alarm. You know, the perpetrator's already been caught, is already in custody, so everyone could sort of calm down immediately. But yes, I am slightly amused by the fact that your attempt to turn the place democratic has led to heavily armored Marines on every street corner.
And that was the other thing that made me think, oh, it's going to be somebody on world, especially when she came in with 2 heavily armored Marines. I was like, they're going to arrest someone in the room, or they're going to take someone in the room, and it's going to be somebody here who's going to be their suspect. It goes back to what we were saying before we started streaming about, you know, perfectly reasonable explanations for things which can be construed in a very different way if you've got a different outlook or mindset or perspective on things. You know, of course they're going to come down heavily armored because there's a planet who's just lost its leader and it's not the most lawful of planets in the first place.
Yeah.
And of course she's going to come into the room with armed guards because it's not the most lawful of planets and she is quite important.
Yeah.
But from our very paranoid, we've just killed someone perspective, my initial go-to was they're going to arrest this guy's assistant who has just been going about her job for
yes
long before we met her.
Yeah. I mean, I would make the case that actually walking into that quite febrile atmosphere of that room with only 2 armed guards shows quite a level of restraint. You know, if you're coming into a room where you know somebody's been murdered, and at that point she hadn't revealed the fact that they'd already had an arrest, if you see what I mean. But you imagine 2 other people looking on, the murderer might be in that room. Yeah. So for somebody to walk in with only 2 bodyguards seems quite restrained, even.
That's true. And nobody on the door at that time either, other than you know, the people, the guards in the street. There was nobody specifically on the door to stop people coming or going other than the bouncers, who by that point I think had decided that it was well above their pay grade. And they were just going to stand back and let whatever happened happen.
I think it gave a sense of total power to me that she knows she's brought down the full might of the military. She can stride in. It's the sign of a woman who knows how much power she's got behind her, and she knows that she can say anything and it can't be questioned. Even if it is questioned, the person that questions it will not be questioning it for long. You know, that person might vanish, for example. And I think that part of Kara's moving outside, and that goes back to her total distrust of military, I guess, from her experiences. And for her, she just wanted to be in a bit more space, I guess, and sort of looking at things from a bit further out. And for me personally, I didn't trust anything. From when you brought her down to the planet, I was totally untrusting of anything you were going to do the whole time. I was like, oh God, this is going to end badly somehow. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think I was exactly the same. Possibly somewhat to do with the way in which she or the military had been painted before then, but also I wasn't expecting this, and automatically sort of, a lot of the time humans will just jump to the worst conclusion. So I was sort of like, this isn't what I was expecting. Something bad's going to happen.
Yeah. Yes, I think that tendency to jump to the wrong conclusion can be significantly amplified if you've literally just murdered the guy who's lying dead in the room.
Exactly.
You've already got something on your conscience.
If you are in fact guilty,
that might make you more paranoid when the armed guards turn up.
Unless you're, a professional criminal, in which case you just shrug it off and you know what you're doing. But
I
us mere mortals.
We can definitely suggest that you guys do it for the love of it. You are amateur, not right.
Yeah.
Although I'm hoping we get some pay for that at some point eventually. Then we're just mercenaries at that point, paid killers.
Well, yes. I mean, again, there's mercenaries and mercenaries. I'm sure there are mercenaries who literally do meet that description of just paid killers. But there must also be those who take on protection jobs and escort jobs and things like that. Where...
moral high ground mercenaries.
Yeah, we follow our hearts.
People.
Yeah. Yes, in the same way that there are hackers who do things which are fundamentally theft of one kind or another, but there are also those who look for flaws so they can tell the companies how to fix them, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you're using that skill set doesn't necessarily make you evil. It's not a skill set you can necessarily just use willy-nilly, just on a Sunday afternoon in the park. but nonetheless, it doesn't have to be used for evil.
I was using the sort of the DnD sort of lawful good to chaotic evil axis. We're definitely not. None of us would be, and I'm glad we don't have to sit inside it for Traveller. But none of us would be lawful good. Agnar's probably, in my mind, kind of the closest, and he's the one that killed him. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, that was kind of situational, I guess. He ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. I picture him as somebody who would have been very lawful good during his serving time and is now kind of kicking back a little bit and trying to ease into the chaotic neutralness of everybody else.
Yeah.
And he's not quite there yet, but he's not quite lawful. He's not lawful good as he was. He's somewhere in between.
Yeah, I sort of think of him as kind of a neutral good sort of character at the moment. He's definitely driven by the impulse to do good things, but not necessarily in line with policy.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
And Stefan is probably about as true neutral as you can get. He's
I would agree with that, actually. Yeah.
He's almost completely divorced of the concept of consequences. If something's fun, he'll do it, and if it's boring, he won't.
Yeah. He's probably Ewan after a few too many glasses of wine during an RPG session, to be fair.
That's why you always start as Agnar at the start of the sessions, and the second hour is always Stefan based.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is funny that, considering how our role-play sessions normally go.
Yeah. I think the most lawful of your group at the moment is probably Soraya. But she's more sort of on the lawful neutral rather than lawful good side.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. She follows. I think she knows the way things are, I guess, and she knows what's she's the one that seems to know what's right and what is wrong. And so I think you're right. Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Yeah, which and Kara is pretty clearly chaotic good.
She's very stereotypically chaotic good, I think. But that means we've got 4 of us in 4 different boxes, which is nice, actually.
Yeah,
that's the way that's followed through.
Yeah, and they're a quite compatible group in terms of their behaviour. They are functionally rational. they overlap in their sort of zones of control. In fact, arguably the two that are furthest apart are the two women. They are probably furthest apart on the D&D spectrum, but they're still well within respect distance, even if they approach things differently.
I think when those times of outside of mission things, when it's sort of hotel rooms and bars, there's definitely a sisterhood kind of thing I'm trying to build between the two of them, where they totally implicitly trust each other. It's just that they know that, there's a very different way of looking at things outside of that. Definitely.
Yes.
And they're both...
But they're both good.
Yeah. So
the end result should be similar. If their ways of going about it are slightly different, I guess.
And that's the thing, I think, because of her chaos, if it's something that Kara believes in, she'll move heaven and earth, legal or not legal, to get it done. But if she doesn't, if she's not too bothered, she'll just slot into a good, let's just follow the good way of things. I'm not too bothered about this, which leads into Sorara a lot more, I guess. So, yeah. So.
And Kara is definitely the kind of person who, if you'd had a meeting at a company and it turned out the company in question was just in it for money and had no interest in human rights or whatever, if there was nothing else she could do, she'd go around the back of the building and spray paint some graffiti on it or something. She would have some little rebellion against the law.
Yeah, even if it meant nothing in the big scheme of things, you couldn't just let it lie. Whereas I think
Soraya just make her feel better.
Exactly. Whereas I think Soraya and Agnar could leave it live for sort of the greater picture, I think. Where Stefan's just as likely just to burn the whole building down. Or shake hands and accept a 20 million deal for all we know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Stefan would do anything if there was something in it for Stefan. And yes, the other two would sort of begin the process of deciding what to do. And while they were having that meeting, there'd be the gentle sound of Kara spray painting dicks on the back of the building.
As Agnar drags her off. Come, you've had your fun. No.
But yeah, I mean that's the way the party has sort of turned out. I mean, I'm not sure that was necessarily intentional, but that's how they've become. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be good to watch this little chat back in a month or so and see whether they've grown or developed or shrunk back into themselves, or how things have changed, I suppose.
I think that's one of the strengths of the alignment system that you get in something like D&D is it does give a player a framework to look at their character through. But it comes with a weakness in that you sort of kind of hamstring your ability to develop the character, particularly early on in their development, when they've just met their party and they're just going out in the world and they don't really know who they are yet. And you've already said, oh, yeah, but they're this.
Yeah.
And you might not know for a few months,
Yeah, definitely. Although, I mean, and I'm a big believer in the fact that it should be quite fluid, and if you as a player make decisions for your character which are completely against their alignment, there will come a point where it will change. And I've been told before by, a DM that my alignment has now changed, which I feel is perfectly reasonable. I guess I do see it as a way to embody how my character would think, or put into words how my character would think. But I don't necessarily go straight to that. I just do what I enjoy role playing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And if that changes the character, that changes the character. Characters change throughout stories all the time and grow.
Yes.
Or not.
Yeah. And I mean, in Traveller, almost all character development is through skills and training. In D&D, obviously, it's a bit more profound. You develop entire archetypes and subclasses and things like that as you go up through. But there's still always that element of developing the role-playing part of the character.
Yeah.
No matter what the system is, you develop how you play them, the way they the way they talk, the way they act, the way they behave in different situations. That's still wide open for you.
I think that although neither you nor I, you nor me, you nor I, are the sort of people that bring in the accents and things like that, and we're equally as happy to talk. I know there's books written on whether you should speak in the first person or third person, for example. You know, Cara does this, or just Cara says it, and I'll flick between the two, and Ewan flicks between the two. Sometimes we go into full conversations with the person. Sometimes we'll just say to you, can Cara buy some tea? And then you'll be like, yeah, that's easy enough to do. Yeah, why not? And then sometimes they'll have a full conversation. And I know that we do that, but at the same time, and I don't know if role play is the right word for it, but we're much more, both of us, I think, are much more role play and story focused, which leads to us trying to solve things first through talking and problem solving, or finding other ways to do it rather than just shooting someone. I know people have been shot in the past, but
with the occasional exception.
Yeah, and you need the occasional exception. And it is sometimes
if
nice.
If it's a gardener, it knows the risk it's taking.
It goes without saying. And you're right. Like,
every role has its exception.
And you know, there are times like when you get dropped on a planet and there's zombie goop, or you get dropped and there's little squids attacking you, or there's, you know, other creatures that are going for you, or there's gardeners. Then some sessions, it is, let's just shoot, let's do it, because that session can be fun and it's a let off steam, and there's, especially with the maps now, there's that little bit of strategy. Where do I stand in cover? When it just used to all be theatre of the mind, we'd say to you, is there some cover? You're like, yeah, so we'd be trying to visualise it, but then the maps sort of help you plan 3 steps ahead, I guess, and so that's nice. But I think at the same time, we do have those full sessions where we're talking, which I think we both appreciate in that regard, and we tend to lean that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, I think maps have their place. They have their place just as a sort of graphic visualization sometimes. But I think they're quite important in any complex or staged combat system, because without it, it just takes forever to describe what cover's available to you and where you can go and how far you are away from things. You know, it's much easier with a map to do that. And certain sort of technical areas. So, I mean, when we did the poisoning, for example, that wasn't a combat situation, but I still gave you a map of the room so you could see where the characters were and the people were. Because again, describing that would have been more of a challenge without you having some kind of visual aid.
Yeah. No, for sure.
But sometimes the graphics are more scene setting, I guess. They're not like battle maps. They're just a thing for you to see. So you've seen a map now of the peaks on Geeka, for example.
Oh, and that's nice. That's
so you have some kind of idea of how they're all laid out. And it's not detailed. It just gives you a sort of sense of where things are.
Yeah, I think that told more. What's the classic picture tells? You know, paints 1,000 words or whatever. Yeah. That totally did. Well, Ewan audibly wowed. Yeah, it was when he saw it, he's like, he loved it, and and it was seeing that you could visualize, you know, coming in on it, you know, flying in, and so in my mind I can see what it looks like, and you know, I've got the overview from you, and then the rest the gaps I can paint myself, if that makes sense, in my head. Yeah. But you've given me the black lines, as it were, which is important. That it helps. I can't paint the picture without the black lines. So
it would have been hard for me to describe the relationship of the 7 peaks themselves without some kind of graphic.
Yeah.
So that was. It felt right to do one of those, even though it's not a battle map. But it's not something we necessarily will focus on all that much. It's just something we can refer back to when needed.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if we're moving between a couple and you're like, oh, you're in wherever now, you're in Elia now. See, I've written notes. You're in Elia and then you need to go to Pito. And you're like, oh, okay, we'll get the transit. Okay, that's going to be 2 stops or whatever it was. Yeah. And then we can, it's good to know. Mm. Oh, I think Ewan's gone to the loo, or his cat's really needy tonight. It could be both. He's taking the cat to the loo.
To be fair, I think we've done a fairly good innings on the stream tonight,
I
haven't we?
think so. We've hit it. I know we were stuck through me starting late, and I'm sorry, anyone. And
it wasn't just you. We had a few technical glitches as well that I don't know what happened, but hey,
that was probably just me as well. I think it's because Teams updated, and then it went when I tried to log in, and that it came up with some really weird stuff in the user bit. So I think the update had fried it in some way, but we should be good for tomorrow.
Good.
Yes. I guess then we'll wait for you to come back and we can say goodbye if we've got nothing else for now.
Yeah. Well, we will be obviously doing a full stream tomorrow night.
Yes.
From 10 p.m. Now 10 p.m. British Summer Time.
It is. Yeah. I have to remember that. Make my changes.
Have you not changed your clock?
No, not in the car yet. But then I'm only driving like once a week at the minute. Now that I'm stuck working from home, I might just leave it for the 6 months. I might leave it till November or whatever, and then change it back then. Don't leave it. Just let it go around.
Keep you on your toes.
Yeah, exactly. Means I won't be late anywhere at least.
So yes, tomorrow night, 10 o'clock BST is episode 7, I think.
It is
of the Boys of the Baltic Star,
and the first one that only has Geeka in the brackets. There, it's the start.
Oh right, yeah.
The last one was Ossin / Geeka. Now it's just Geeka.
Yeah. Yes, you won't be able to use your in-transit graphic though, will you?
What one? The
the Baltic Star in-transit graphic. No, it's now arrived again.
Of course,
I don't know. It depends how spontaneous and how chaotic we decide to be.
I only got.
Yeah, well, yes, there is that.
What have I got in there? I only got to use it for like. I did it, but I only got to use it for like 5 minutes. So I'm putting it on the spamming on the. I've got in orbit. It's in orbit at the minute, so that's a new one as well. And Geeka's now at the bottom, so there it is. That's all there. Bit more of a plain map. In orbit, but it'll probably go back to refueling soon. Although I haven't said that, we might just buy it from the thing this time. We'll see how it goes, I guess.
Oh yeah.
We're flush for cash. We're flush for cash now. You know, all this money. We'll do a bit of trading. Spend that all on fuel.
We lost 50 mega credits on the last planet. I don't know what you're talking about. Flush for cash.
And this week, the week that we're there, is all business though. It's purely business and trading, and that's it. No time for pleasure. So
no theme parks.
No theme parks whatsoever. Sorry,
no Earth Park.
No Earth Park. Nothing fun you were planning. So let's start with some very serious business tomorrow at 10 o'clock. No fun, just serious business.
Yeah, absolutely no fun, no joking, no laughter. Under no circumstances will we see any large ancient animals. I
would like at least an hour bartering for trade prices. If people are interested in an hour of bartering for trade prices, then you know where to come tomorrow night at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I think you're going to exhaust all of the trade price bartering options within about 4 minutes.
Spen just gets bored. Oh, look, I've rolled an 8. Well done. Congratulations.
Yep, it'll be that.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you're watching live, tomorrow at 10. If you're not watching live, it's either today at 10 or in the past at 10. So you'll have to watch a catch-up. Have a happy Easter, everyone, and we will speak to you soon. Oh, look, there's Earth Park. It's turned up just at the end. I'll pause. Let's all pause for a second in silence to enjoy it, and then we'll go after about 20 seconds of silence. In fact, I'll get rid of everything. Hang on. There we go. Anyway, let's get rid of all the graphics. There it is.
So there you go.
I'm looking forward to.
So take us to Geeka.
Reptile Rocks. Some Moramps there. Looking forward to that. We could leave the eggs there.
Oh, is it going to be the first beach we've encountered?
No, you encountered a beach with squidlings off it.
Oh yes.
It'll be the first beach without squidlings.
I may have pictured that slightly different. More of like a sandy runoff of a beach, you know.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't like a glorious
touristy beach.
Tourist beach, no.
Yeah.
No. But
good night, everyone.
On that note.
on that note of squid and sand.